with the world plunged into the shadows of World War II during one of the most critical and decisive moments of the conflict that would determine the future of humanity, almost all scientific research had been diverted toward military technology. After a golden age in which we had finally ventured into the depths of space and time to understand our place among the stars, and as part of the universe's grand narrative, many astronomical projects were suspended or slowed down. The once fruitful international collaboration that had led to major discoveries beyond our horizon was interrupted by a war whose wounds were far from healing. But in the midst of the darkness that engulfed the Earth, there were those who did not forget the imperishable light in the firmament. At a time when the idea that our galaxy was just one among a vast ocean was well established, German astronomer Walter Baade sought to peer into the heart of the closest island of light to our home. And the very darkness of a world at war was going to allow him to do so. Due to constant blackouts in 1944, the night sky over Los Angeles was free from light pollution. Baade took advantage of these unusual dark conditions to push the 100-inch Hooker telescope at the Mount Wilson Observatory to its limits. Allowing the light to transport him to a place 2.5 million light-years away, Andromeda revealed itself before his eyes in full splendor. A galactic majesty where the gods of light were gathered in a perfectly orchestrated gravitational symphony. In his observations, Baade noticed that the stars near the galaxy's core were different from those in the spiral arms. Using spectroscopy, he analyzed the starlight to determine their chemical composition. As stellar spectra show absorption lines characteristic of the elements they contain. Those roaming the distant reaches of the core, sailing in the galactic arms, exhibited stronger spectral lines of heavier elements. They were rich in metals, which in cosmology refers to all elements heavier than helium. In contrast, those residing in the galactic bulge near the heart of Andromeda showed fewer metal lines. Their metallicity was markedly lower than that of the stars in the outer regions. It was evident that the light was trying to tell us something. Stars emerge from the ashes of others that have perished. Like the phoenix, they are reborn through the elements forged in the heart of a preceding god. The younger ones, born from gas polluted by metals released in the death of their predecessors, should have a higher metallicity. With each stellar generation, the purity of hydrogen and helium diminishes. Metals inhabit their cores, signaling their presence through light. Baade was witnessing evidence of this stellar lineage, two distinct communities of stars. The parents and the children. Following his investigations, the astronomer proposed that stars could be classified into two major categories based on their age, composition, and location in the galaxy. Population 1 stars were young, metal-rich stars more commonly found in the spiral arms, those that are still forming today. In the Milky Way, the Sun is one of them, a young god with high metallicity, with between 2% and 3% of its composition represented by metals. Population 2 stars are old, metal-poor stars, purer in hydrogen and helium, gods that dwell near the galactic core. The last heirs of an ancient era, witnesses to the very formation of their galaxy, with less than 0.1% of their composition contaminated by metals. Aware of the impact of his discovery that same year, Baade published a report on the differentiation of stellar populations in the Astrophysical Journal. The article generated enough buzz in the community for him to be invited to Harvard University to give a lecture on his findings. In what would be the most important presentation of his life, he introduced the theory of population 1 and 2 stars, and discussed their significance in our understanding of stellar and galactic evolution. The lecture generated immense fascination among the attendees, gaining international recognition and solidifying a profound shift in the perception of the lineage of the gods that inhabit this Olympus of light. The distinction between these two populations implied that the universe had undergone a chemical evolution. Population 1 stars, which formed after population 2 stars, had a higher amount of heavy elements because the interstellar medium in which they formed had been enriched by previous generations of stars that exploded as supernovae. But soon, it became clear that there was a missing chapter in this story, a prologue to recount the true birth of light. By the mid-1960s, after more than 3 decades of controversy and attempts to discredit it, the Big Bang Theory was solidifying as the cosmological model that best explained the evolution of the universe. Contrary to the static conception of the cosmos with a spatially and temporally infinite universe, the Big Bang spoke of a beginning of time, a day without a yesterday. The birth of the universe from a very dense and hot state from which it began an expansion that created the ocean of reality we inhabit. Nature was not static, it was changing. Evolving from an origin in the dawn of time very different from the present. One of the most important predictions of the Big Bang Theory is that the early universe contained only the lightest elements: hydrogen, helium, and negligible traces of lithium. The heavier elements, the metals, did not arise from this beginning of time. They formed later in the hearts of the gods of light. Everything was leading to the inevitability of a first generation of stars, very different from those that inhabit the universe today. A stellar lineage even more ancient, born when the universe had no metals at all, formed from pure hydrogen and helium. Following in Baade's legacy, and by the 1970s, Soviet physicist Yakov Zeldovich continued using Baade's nomenclature, extending this lineage to describe primordial gods, the first stars in the universe, those in whose hearts light was born for the first time, were named population 3 stars. Zeldovich proposed that they should be very different from the stars we see today due to the chemical composition of the early universe, conditions that have never been repeated. The community gradually adopted these ideas, and over time, the notion that these monsters must have existed in the dawn of time became firmly established. Their theorization was refined over the decades through advances in astrophysics and cosmology. By the 1990s, numerical simulations of the gravitational collapse of the first gas clouds showed how these first stars could indeed have formed. Although they had not been directly observed, residing in the most remote depths of time, all progress in understanding the universe pointed to their inevitability. The distribution of elements in old stars and the intergalactic gas provided indirect evidence of their past existence. Population 3 stars became a crucial theoretical component in understanding the early evolution of the universe. In an era where all that inhabited an eternal ocean of space and time was darkness, somehow these gods rose to bring light, and begin the forging of elements that bring complexity to the universe. It was time to transport ourselves to that age of darkness and witness the cosmic dawn. At the dawn of reality, in the first minutes after the universe's seed blossomed, the newly risen space-time was filled with plasma, a primordial state of nature, too hot for particles to find the peace necessary to create the elementary building blocks of matter. The cosmos was a dense, opaque ball of plasma where something, however, lurked. A mysterious, invisible substance navigated freely through this fierce ocean of energy. Guided by the paths marked by cosmic inflation, dark matter was raising the pillars of the universe. Weaving a structure that connected all corners of that sea of darkness, the cosmic web silently emerged, patiently waiting for its moment to declare war on the shadows. Finally, 380,000 years after the Big Bang, the universe had expanded and cooled enough for protons to capture electrons. The first atoms of hydrogen and helium were formed. The universe had entered its era of recombination. The freshly sculpted matter sought its place in that ocean, secretly guided by dark matter. Prudently, by its gravitational influence, dark matter directed hydrogen and helium toward the filaments of the cosmic web. Gravity was anchoring the primordial matter to the pillars. The gas was seeking refuge away from that sea of darkness. For millions of years, the cosmic web attracted more and more matter, a hunt to sculpt the masterpiece of the universe. A long dark age during which that diffuse mist of matter slowly gave way to the beginning of a new era. The cosmos was approaching a point of no return. Hydrogen and helium, driven to those filaments, created increasingly dense clouds, ever hotter. And without metals to cool them from within, without heavy atoms to emit photons that carried away some of the thermal energy, a cosmic storm, unlike anything ever seen again, was about to erupt. In the densest regions, the gas heated so much that for the first time in history, nuclear fusion reactions awoke. The bowels of hell roared. The cosmic furnaces had erupted. And so, in an instant that decided the future of all that is and will be, the first God was conceived, and the first light was born amidst the paradoxical silence of the void. 100 million years after the birth of space and time, the peaceful reign of darkness had come to an end. The first population 3 stars were emerging, one by one. Unable to resist the power of light, darkness was witnessing the beginning of a new era. The gods were claiming their place in this empire. The true moment of creation, a magical, almost metaphysical moment, the instant of the first lights. The blossoming of an Olympus that had begun the forging of the primordial elements. We were witnessing the cosmic dawn. Without stars, the universe would be a meaningless place, an infinite box of gas. It was not until these first stars were born that it began to be the place we identify as our cosmos. A scientific version of the Genesis story written by monsters who held the universe's destiny in their hands. Population 3 stars were immense giants, extremely luminous and hot. Without metals contaminating the environment, these primordial gods were essentially pure collections of hydrogen and helium. The clouds from which they emerged contained only these two elements, the lightest and created in the primordial nucleosynthesis after the Big Bang. In star formation, cooling is crucial to allow the gas to condense to the point of igniting nuclear reactions and forming a star. In those clouds of hydrogen and helium, without heavy elements, the cooling capacity was much lower than what happens today. And without the ability to cool effectively, the collapse occurred on a much larger mass scale. The clouds did not have time to fragment into smaller cores, each of which could have evolved into several smaller stars. Everything was condensed into a single titan. Population 3 stars were much more massive than future generations, where the conditions of metallicity in the nebulas of the later universe allowed for the formation of lower mass stars. These primordial gods could have been hundreds or even 1,000 times more massive than the Sun, with surface temperatures exceeding 100,000 degrees, nearly 20 times hotter than the surface of our mother star. Hence, they radiated a mighty blue color and shone like 10 million suns, something that would eclipse an entire galaxy in the present universe. The largest and most powerful stars that ever existed. violent and volatile giants who fought against the darkness that surrounded them to make the Olympus of light a new kingdom. Despite shining as brightly as they did, their light could not travel great distances. The first stars germinated amidst a dense fog of darkness. Neutral hydrogen atoms still filled the spaces between stars, stopping photons, and making that Olympus a place where shadows still reigned. But these primordial gods would not allow their empire to remain unseen. Their enormous mass had dramatic consequences, leading them to live a life very different from current stars, a life dominated by a violence that transformed the environment around them. Emanating a powerful ultraviolet radiation, the population 3 stars were responsible for the reionization of the universe. The waves emitted by the giants broke neutral hydrogen atoms into free protons and electrons, ionizing the gas in their immediate surroundings, dissipating the fog, and banishing the darkness from their domains. Around each star, bubbles of ionized hydrogen formed, growing larger and larger, until eventually making the entire universe transparent. The Dark Age was definitively over. Light had won the war, traveling freely through the space it now dominated. That first generation of stars, through their fury, changed the universe forever. But deep within them, protected in a heart where the gates of hell had been opened, a doom awaited. A cosmic alchemy, a gift crafted in the star's bowels, which to be released would demand a sacrifice from the god. For the first time in the universe's history, new elements were being created. In their hearts, the first stars began the transformation of matter, forging the atoms that would later sculpt all the complexity that surrounds us and constitutes us. But there was only one way to release those ingredients: the early death of that first generation of gods. Stars are factories of complexity, furnaces that create chemical elements. Starting with hydrogen, which they fused to form helium, these primordial stars gradually formed heavier elements in a delicate and awe-inspiring dance between two forces. Gravity constantly tries to make a star collapse under its own weight, bringing the core's ingredients closer together. When the protons get close enough, another fundamental interaction comes into play. The strong nuclear force takes over and binds the protons together. Nuclear fusion is complete, a new atom is forged, and an enormous amount of energy is released. The pressure from these nuclear reactions battles gravity until the star finds the equilibrium it needs to sustain its life. A star with more mass will need to release more energy from its core to maintain balance. Consequently, it must burn its fuel more quickly. The greater the mass, the higher the pressure in the core. According to the ideal gas law, temperature increases with pressure. The hearts of these stars, the most colossal the universe has ever witnessed, were akin to hell itself. Melting furnaces pushing matter to its limits. At the same time, nuclear fusion reactions are incredibly sensitive to temperature. A slight increase in temperature leads to a dramatic rise in the fusion rate. This means that the greater the mass of the star, the more rapidly it consumes its fuel and approaches its demise. These giants were born with a fated destiny to live fierce and short lives. In a constant struggle for survival, unable to withstand the power of the hell they harbored within. The mass with which they were conceived became a death sentence. A star with 10 times the sun's mass shines 10,000 times brighter. However, burning 10 times the amount of fuel at a rate 10,000 times faster means that its lifespan is 1,000 times shorter. When we talk about population 3 stars, which could be hundreds or even 1,000 times more massive than the sun, we're taking this to the extreme. In what on a cosmic scale is the blink of an eye, these gods reach the place where all paths end. With uncontrollable fury, population 3 stars quickly exhausted the hydrogen from which they were born. At that point, the core began to collapse in on itself and heat up, to which the star responded by forging increasingly complex elements, atoms with a greater number of protons, releasing more and more energy at each step. But eventually, the star's poison would come. When the star had forged iron atoms, with 26 protons in their nucleus, everything changed forever. For the first time in this sequence, their fusion did not release energy. The moment the star reached an iron core, it had poisoned itself. There was nothing left, no pressure from within, to prevent the collapse. Despite fighting with all its might until the last breath, the star had lost the battle against gravity. The beginning of its end had arrived. But something else lurked in its depths. In the star's core, temperatures and pressures had been reached that would never be repeated again in the history of the universe. Under these conditions, gamma radiation, the highest energy, was generated in large quantities due to nuclear reactions. As a desperate measure, gamma rays created the last thermal pressure to overcome gravity. But there was no hope. When the energy of gamma photons reached a critical level, collisions with other particles became so powerful that the energy turned into matter. A spontaneous creation of electron-positron pairs occurred, particles of matter and antimatter germinating in its ruined heart. At this point, gamma radiation could no longer counteract gravity. The particle-antiparticle pairs absorbed the energy of the photons and reduced the radiation pressure. The last pillars supporting that cathedral of light collapsed. Gravity, which had been waiting patiently, could now make the star collapse in on itself. Everything rushed toward its core, making conditions so extreme that for an instant, nuclear fusion reactions reactivated. But not to forge new elements. All they would do was complete the god's sacrifice. In barely an instant, the reactivation of nuclear reactions released such a colossal amount of energy that the star was torn apart from within. It had just exploded in what is known as a pair-instability supernova. A supernova that left no stellar remnant. No memory of its existence remained. The giant was utterly destroyed, reduced to dust. In what estimates suggest could have been a few million to just 100,000 years, the population 3 stars perished in the most violent phenomena of nature. A sacrifice in which, however, they gifted something to the universe. In their death, all those elements they jealously guarded in their core were released. The jewels of kings, scattered across space, became the seeds of a new generation of stars. The stellar lineage continued, a final act of creation, life finding a way amidst the devastation. In that Olympus of light, like the phoenix rising from its ashes, the children of these primordial gods could live longer and more peaceful lives. The era of population 3 stars was coming to an end. Their legacy was anchored in their descendants, bearers of their memory. They had fulfilled the purpose of their lives: to scatter the shadows from their empire and gift the interstellar space with heavy elements like carbon, oxygen, and iron. The chemical enrichment of the early universe was complete. The first population 2 stars, the first heirs of these primordial beasts, began to create their empires, gathering in the galaxies that give meaning to the cosmos. A new era, one that would eventually lead to us, had germinated from that sacrifice. With their death, these first stars enrich the ocean of hydrogen with the metals that give meaning to nature, elements that would become more complex stars, planets, and in time ourselves. But something else survived. An unforeseen consequence of their sacrifice that opened the gates of the Underworld. A tormented memory of their existence in the form of the first guardians of the darkness. Hidden within that Olympus, unnoticed amidst the newly risen empire of light, the hearts of some of these stars were drawn to the darkness they seemed to have banished from their realm. Those gods, not colossal enough to sacrifice themselves into oblivion, were poisoned by a curse. As they approached their demise, but were unable to trigger the gamma radiation reactions that would lead to total annihilation in the greater giants, the gates of the Underworld began to open slowly and stealthily. After a lifetime in the shadow of the Colossi, these lesser gods were about to claim their posthumous right to the throne. With their death, the gravitational collapse was not powerful enough to reignite nuclear reactions. The descent into the abyss continued, collapsing the very foundations of reality. The star lacked the power to sacrifice itself in a final explosion. At the mercy of inescapable gravity, the collapse continued until it fractured the architecture of the cosmos at a point. The stellar remnants seemed to have vanished from the universe. But something remained. A corrupted memory of their existence. A ghost amidst the shadows. The first black holes had germinated, an invisible monster with the power to destroy worlds, to drain the light from the universe and to stop time. Guardians of the darkness, turned into messengers of the Underworld. Once again, as in the dawn of time, the struggle between light and darkness was reborn. Within their depths lies the path of no return. In the singularity hidden in their heart, all the laws governing the universe collapse. Everything is drawn toward their gravitational power, a tyranny absolute, a prison in space and time from which nothing can escape. Everything that crosses that boundary is lost forever. These first black holes were barely infants, dwarfed by the gods around them. But their dominion over gravity allowed them to confront these colossi face to face. And against all odds, the emissaries of the Underworld became a serious threat. Sailing through the oceans of space, sheltered under their own darkness, they began to devour the gods. Like stellar cannibals, the black holes fed on their plasma. A memory of what was once a star consuming its brethren. Without mercy, any that ventured too close to their domain were annihilated by the Guardians' lust for power. The black holes gained more and more mass, more and more gravitational power, until they became monsters. Beasts in whose hearts even the memory of their days of splendor as gods of light no longer remained. And with the end of the first star's lineage, with the second generation of stars born from their ashes but unable to rival these phantoms, all the black holes sought to claim the vacant throne of Olympus, to become the kings of the new empire. Drawn by the power of their brethren, the black holes are fighting for that dominion, devouring one another, until one has the tyranny needed to become king. A supermassive black hole occupying the throne at the center of the newly formed galaxies. Stars are gathering in peninsulas, islands of light that conceal one of these beasts at their heart. Reigning at the core of the great galaxies, black holes have shaped the structures that give meaning to the universe. Light and darkness, in a delicate and fleeting balance, have found a way to coexist. The stars have found a refuge. the story of the first stellar generation has ended. They have passed the torch to their children, the new gods of both light and darkness, to write a new chapter in the history of the cosmos. A tale that would eventually lead to us. A stellar ash born from those ancient sacrifices in which the universe, perhaps for the first time, found a way to understand itself. Since their theorization, population 3 stars became essential to understanding the evolution of the universe. Yet they remained entirely hypothetical entities. It is estimated that the last of them died more than 13.2 billion years ago, just 600 million years after the Big Bang. Those primordial gods have long since perished. There was only one way to have direct evidence of their existence: to gaze into the deepest abyss of space and time. The primordial gods reigned during an age of the universe so ancient that due to the expansion of space, their light would no longer be visible, lost in an ever-growing ocean. As humans striving to see the invisible, all hopes are pinned on one place: a creation that can transport us back to that past to gaze upon the primordial Olympus. On January 24, 2022, more than 30 years after the conception of NASA's most ambitious mission, the James Webb Space Telescope reached its orbit at the Lagrange point L2, 1.5 million kilometers from Earth, ready to begin its odyssey, to explore the most remote confines of space and time. Webb had been designed to capture light invisible to our eyes. It was an infrared telescope that would break through the physical barriers that Hubble, its predecessor, had encountered. It was designed to inspect light from the dawn of time, which, after billions of years traversing space, had shifted into the infrared spectrum. With a primary mirror of 6.5 meters and extremely sensitive instruments, it would be able to detect the light of stars and galaxies formed when the universe was barely an infant. One of its main missions, then, was to search for the echoes of those primordial gods. Webb could explore the farthest reaches of the cosmos, traveling back in time, to a past imprinted in that infrared radiation. A light that we had never before been able to see so clearly, but that held the keys to finding those ancient stars, in whose heart's light was first kindled. Formed from the primordial gas of the universe, population 3 stars would be composed exclusively of hydrogen and helium, without metals. It could search for the characteristic spectral signatures of these elements in their purest form, something that would indicate the presence of these bodies. James Webb could deliver that lost light to help us understand the origin of all that we are. Though they would be extremely difficult to observe if the telescope mapped the light of the most distant galaxies in space, and therefore in time, there was a possibility of finding hints of their past existence. And while many believed it to be a utopian pursuit, it is possible that James Webb has found that treasure, a gift hidden in a galaxy at the dawn of time. Painted on the canvas of the constellation Ursa Major rests what for a long time was the oldest and most distant known galaxy in the universe. GNZ 11 is an island of light that awaits at the farthest reaches of space and time, at a distance calculated to be 32 billion light-years due to the universe's expansion. We are viewing the galaxy as it was 13.4 billion years ago, only 400 million years after the Big Bang. The light began its journey so long ago that it was not until it had traveled for 9 billion years that our Earth formed. And since then, throughout our planet's entire history, it only had to complete the final third of its journey. It is an image from the beginning of time, one of the first galaxies formed, and, therefore, the place where all hopes of finding that first stellar generation rested. If there was a place to search for those founding gods of light, it was in that galaxy. Thus, in 2023, through James Webb's observations of GNZ 11, a team of astronomers led by University of Cambridge professor Roberto Maiolino examined the faint light, weakened into a feeble infrared radiation from that island of light. In its depths, the scientists found a gaseous cluster of helium forming a halo around the galaxy, glowing at a very specific wavelength. A glow observed only when helium, in its pure form, uncontaminated by other metals, is extremely hot, ionized by something highly energetic. The initial hypothesis was that it was a supermassive black hole ionizing that cloud as it grows and feeds voraciously. But further investigations of the cloud revealed that so early in the universe's history, there couldn't be a monster large enough to ionize the gas in the way they were observing. Only one option remained. They had just found the first evidence of a community of population 3 stars transforming their surroundings with their radiation. They were witnessing an ancient past, observing that struggle of the gods to make their Olympus a place liberated from the dark fog. The parents of all stars were sending a whisper, a nearly inaudible lament to let us know they were there, beyond the horizons of space and time. The team published the results of their study in April 2024 in Astronomy and Astrophysics, showing the detection of the so-called Hell emission line, or doubly ionized helium in the halo of GNZ 11, which could indicate the presence and direct confirmation of those primitive stars. The astronomers argued that the helium emission combined with the absence of other metallic lines was the conclusive signal of population 3 stars ionizing a primordial gas. Similarly, they estimated that the total mass of such bodies in the galaxy's halo would be 600,000 times the mass of the Sun. So assuming an average of 600 solar masses for each star, we would be observing a metropolis of about 1,000 primordial stars. The article has generated enormous excitement, reigniting the interest of the entire community in those primordial gods we believed we would never see. Perhaps, with that light from the confines of time, we have just become the first witnesses of the dawn of light. Although the foundations are solid and the observations quite promising, many more studies will have to be conducted before we can confirm that population 3 stars are behind the results. Many have argued that the helium emission could be caused by a source closer to Earth that is deceiving us, a completely different element that, due to the universe's expansion, has stretched its wavelength, making it appear as helium emission from a greater distance. But whatever the case, what is clear is that we are getting closer to that place we thought we would never explore. Those violent and volatile gods will never reign again. The splendor of their empire is now barely a memory, echoes faded from an ancient past. The universe will never again shine as it did in its early days when the pillars of the Olympus of light were raised. They roared for a fleeting cosmic instant at the dawn of time, but their legacy lives on. Their influence has been forever imprinted in space, and their memory continues to pulse within each and every one of us. Resonating forever in the realm they once dominated. They were the beginning of a new era, and the catalyst for the most precious gift the cosmos has given itself. A universe that was once immaculate, pure in its composition, tainted by the sacrifice of the founding fathers. And yet, it was from those ashes that, in at least one place in this eternal ocean of unconsciousness, those gods were reborn. In us, in that seed they planted from time immemorial, they found a way to remember their past, to retell the splendor of their days. We are that part of the lineage that has ensured they do not fall into oblivion, that the story of the primordial gods remains alive in the ashes of their own sacrifice.